The title of the lesson tonight is Truth or Consequences. Anybody remember that program? We elderly people do. They ask a question you couldn't possibly give the truthful answer to, and then you had to pay the consequences. And the consequences. Yeah. From the show. Yeah, Bob Barker and some people, I don't know exactly what I've read, but I have totally forgotten what all got involved in that. There was something involved with the radio and then later the TV show and all that got the town its name. So they are related. Does anybody else know something that, okay.
I've heard that too, so.
Well, I am finding myself second guessing myself on some things here because I keep thinking, why am I disagreeing so much with this fellow that wrote this book? And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm getting the wrong message. Maybe I'm taking it wrong. And then I'll turn around and read something. I thought, no, I think that's what he means. And I don't really think that that's what any of us really believes, except maybe partly, if I can put it that way. But there's a beautiful passage here at the beginning that I want us to read together. It's not paying any attention to my command. You know, I'm such a commanding person. I probably haven't turned it on. That's probably what the deal is. Or the batteries are running down. Let's see, what else? What else? That didn't do it. That will, I think. Huh. Okay. Well, that's going to be inconvenient. But anyway, the passage is in Ephesians chapter 4. You think it might work now? Well, you're probably right. Do that again. Touch that button. That one looks ominous. Yeah.
Is it the one on the side?
Well, it says BT and RF. If I push the BT, it shows a red thing. If I push it,
I'll play with it. Get it working.
He's the technologist.
okay. Well, we're familiar with this passage. We go over it every so often because it's important. But he says, then we will no longer be immature like children. And as I look at our group, we should be reasonably mature. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way. More and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. It helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. So stop telling lies. Do that too. No, that one. So stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth. Now then, his key thought on that is telling the truth. And he equates making sure that we tell our thoughts and our feelings equivalent to truth or not truth. And I'll say more about that. That maybe was just a little confusing, except if you've been in here a time or two, you may know exactly what I'm talking about. But our author says that we all, this I'm quoting, we all yearn for relationships in which we can be completely honest, open, and vulnerable, in which we can share failures as well as successes, shortcomings as well as strengths, in which we can reveal doubts and fears, find empathy and confidentiality. I don't have any trouble with that. I think we all want relationships like that. And we'd like to think that we have maybe a number of relationships that are like that they're open, they're honest, and that we have friends who are trustworthy. And he says these intimate, authentic relationships are exactly what God had in mind for us. He created us for relationships and wants us to experience them at their best. Now, think about that first paragraph, though, that I talked about there, where he says we want it to be honest and open, where we can share failures and successes. And then, well, would you think that you would seek that kind of relationship with the fella who stole your towel at the gym? And you're thinking, what a stupid question. I'll clear that up in just a second. I'll clear that, but really, the guy that you don't know, you've never seen him before, but you see him today, and he stole your towel. Are you looking for that wonderful relationship with him? And here's why I'm asking it, because the first illustration that this guy uses about this wonderful, intimate, open relationship that we're supposed to have is this. He says, one day when I was getting ready to step out of the shower at the YMCA where I work out, I noticed another man step out ahead of me. After making sure no one was watching, he grabbed my towel, dried himself, threw the towel on the floor, then headed for the locker room. I couldn't believe it. The man didn't know it was my towel that he had just ripped off, so when I entered the locker room, he tried to engage me in friendly conversation. The stock market, the Bears players strike, the weekend, the weather forecast. What did I do? I joined the conversation graciously, submerging my feelings about what he had done. We dressed and parted ways. But do you know what? Next time I see that man, this is the first thought that's going to cross my mind. Why did he swipe my towel? The man doesn't know it. Let's see. I think I may have a slide here. Well, okay, an honest friend. I forgot that one. There's a guy with a towel. I didn't want to show you just coming out of the shower. I didn't think y'all wanted to see that, and I didn't want to show that. So anyway, I didn't. Anyway, but he says, I'm going to think about why did he swipe my towel? The man doesn't know it, but there's a major blockage in our relationship. They didn't have a relationship. I'm sorry, but this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Why didn't I just say, excuse me, sir, that's my towel, or sir, did you forget your towel? I'll be happy to get you one. Why didn't I engage myself in the situation honestly? And something tells me, yeah, let's go ahead and look at that. Honesty to him is confrontation, it looks to me like. And I've listened to Dale's sermons, and you have too, and Dale has said there are times when we need to have confrontation. But is this a time when we need to have a confrontation? Or is this a time when we can say, well, I guess he needed the towel, or I don't know. And he says, why didn't I engage myself in this situation honestly. And I've noticed a lot of people have funny ideas about honesty anyway, about what it is and what it isn't. But I'll skip that part. He says, I'll tell you why, because it's human nature to prefer peacekeeping over truth-telling, and most of us will do almost anything to avoid conflict. Well, I mean, if he said something to him about it, that would be the truth, that your fellow stole his towel. And just do anything to avoid conflict. It sounds to me like he's saying, so we ought to run toward the conflict. Is that the way we're supposed to live Christian life?
Says if he takes your coat, give him your, or your cloak, give him your coat too. So
Yeah.
if he took the towel, you might say, would you like the washcloth?
Well,
I
yes.
wonder too, and I've been thinking a lot about this personally, but you know, if you engage in a conversation with someone and you're listening to them, you may give him your cloak anyway.
Yeah.
You know, even and maybe that's the challenge
To build the
that
relationship.
he's given us is to do that.
Well, in 1 Corinthians 13, a passage that we almost know from memory, it says that love seeketh not its own, King James Version, which to me is just another way of saying, I have the right to give up my rights. I have the right not to push something. I can suffer loss if it is helpful and useful to somebody else. I think it's pretty much the same thing as sacrificing for somebody else.
I don't know, maybe he's pushing for engagement rather than confrontation.
Well,
It's not, I mean, it's like, if you just ignore it but if you engage with him,
well, I
without
look at.
being confrontation.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I really do, because I don't want to misrepresent this guy's thoughts, but he's worrying the daylights out of me. But he says we'll do almost anything to avoid conflict.
Some
Yeah,
people do, not everyone.
that's true. Oh, yeah, you and I know some people who rush right toward the conflict. We've had the conflict with them. And how is it working for her? I know that you and I are thinking about the same person. How's it working for her? Not really working very well, is it? Well, his first question is, and maybe you can come up with something here. Describe in vivid detail a time when you were burning to tell the truth, but decided not to. And what were some of the results of that decision? Of course, telling the truth there is, I think it's engage or confront. Have you ever been glad you kept your mouth shut? Have you ever regretted the fact that you didn't keep your mouth shut? It's difficult to walk that line sometimes.
But sometimes there are unpleasant things you have to tell people
That's true.
you can't avoid.
That's true. That's true.
Teachers get into that all the time with parents, because parents are denying something about the child, and that teacher has to, in some ways, confront the parent with, well, this is what happen, or this is the way it is. And, I think a lot of it goes back to how you present the truth.
That is also true. You don't want to just say, well, your kid's dumb as a rock. That's just not putting it as well as it could be put. And it's probably not true either. You know, I don't know any kids that are that kind of dumb, but still. And his illustration on this is a TV show that I don't remember if he gave the name of it or not, but they took a camera and hid it in this restaurant by the area where the counter, and when a person would order a hamburger with fries, they had this guy that would walk up and sit down beside whoever that was that ordered the burger and fries and would order something, but before his order came, he'd sneak over and steal a French fry. And then he'd steal another French fry, and he'd sit there and steal French fries until they brought his food. And of course, the fun of the show was watching the reaction of these people who saw him stealing those French fries, the little slow burn that they did. There's a guy, I don't think that's from that show, but he said sometimes they would, ball up their fists because they were so angry, but not a single one of them ever said a word. Well, maybe that's another one of those cases where there needs to be some engagement, like, are you that hungry? Are you that starved for carbs? I don't know. Well, and another question that he has that I think is one that to me was kind of thought-provoking, maybe not in the way he intended, but still. So how can speaking the truth, even when it's hard or painful, and the passage did say speaking the truth in love, and I think he recognizes that and would intend that in the things that he's asked. But he said, how can speaking the truth, even when it is hard or painful, be an expression of love? Yes.
I just have lots of thoughts going on in my head because today I just happened to hear the song Teaching the Truth in Love by acapella. I don't know if you've even heard that song.
I don't think I have.
It's a wonderful song because it talks about, well, let me just read some of the lyrics that are going in my mind.
Go for it.
And the chorus part says, are we teaching the truth in love, telling it like it is? Are we holding pure motives, showing that we care? Are we teaching the truth in love? When we talk about our motives and our heart, and the song gives direct examples of how Jesus did that with people. But I think often, so many times we want to just say what we want to say without really checking our motives. And so this is something I obviously need to hear today because it's popping up again.
Well,
But
I remember being called across the street one time because they had gotten in a huge argument, religious argument, and preachers just love to get in the middle of those. But anyway, they were having one, and evidently my presence calmed things down. But the question is, did I go to speak the truth in love and try to convince in love, or did I just go to win the argument? because I think we've at least felt like that a lot of our people in times past have just gone to win the argument.
Oh, and it's hard if you think you know better to not try and fix it.
Yeah.
Some personalities are like that, where, oh, if I did this or told them this, it might fix the problem. When you may not even really understand the problem because you didn't really engage them. You didn't care about the person enough to really know what the problem is.
There's a,
So that may be totally off, but
no, I think it's
that's what-
valuable for us to think about. I really do. I'm glad you brought it up. I thought about the TV show, and I don't know if y'all have ever watched it or not. Sometimes it can be pretty hard to watch, called Intervention, where they take someone who has, in many of the instances, have a real drug problem, and they're hurting themselves, they're hurting their family, and denying that they have a problem, and knowing down deep maybe that they do, and there are people who are interventionists. They've studied this. They really know how to do it. And they take a person and they get there and they may just leave because they realize my family is here and something's going down and I'm not staying for it. Sometimes that happens. But most of the time, they love their family enough and care about their family enough that they will stay and start listening. And there's, as you know, there's a way to approach people that is helpful, and there's a way to approach people that just isn't going to work. And it's always interesting when these people, and this is a picture from that TV show, say, you know, this is what you have to do. And we're saying this because we love you. We see how the family's being hurt. We see how you're being hurt. This is what you have to do. And if you don't do that, then I will do this. And it's not punitive. It's not, at least it's not intended to be. It's more of I have to save myself. I can't let you drag me down with you. Our family is going to have to go on. And, you know, you've got some choices to make. And a lot of times, a person will leave one of these confrontations and nothing really happens. And it's really sad. And people usually, I don't know if they follow through or not, but hopefully they do, to try to get them to an intervention. Most of the time, they end up going and getting in the car and going to an alcohol rehab or a drug rehab or something like that with an expert, because it's a TV show and they got lots of money, that is going to try to really make an intervention that works in that person's life. And of course, we would all like to be able to help people that are in real trouble. My experience with some of that is when you start working with people who have problems, serious problems, it can be very time consuming, makes it very difficult. But we need to love people enough to give our time too. Anything that I brought up that you want to talk about there? Well, on question 3, did I write questions in on this? I don't know if I did or not. Probably didn't. So this is probably, okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. Question 3, he says, in Ephesians 4, we are called on to quit lying and be truthful. what are some of the common falsehoods spoken in the following places? And he brought up in the marketplace. Boy, did I go blank on that for a while. And I'm not sure the little illustration I wrote down here is worth anything, but
Well, car salesman will tell you anything to get you to buy a car.
You said Robbie's brother, now Robbie has a brother who sold cars for years and he's a good guy, so I'll stand up for him, but yeah, that's a classic.
Or insurance. Salesman.
Now you're getting close.
Robbie sold insurance.
You'll have to admit there's some in that industry
Yeah, of course.
that will lie to you to make the sale. You don't buy what you thought you bought.
and technically it's against the law
Yeah.
for them to misrepresent.
Sometimes you may not.
I had an insurance salesman that called me the next day after he sold me some stuff and said, Mr. Dennis, he said, I didn't mean to. He was a member of the church. He said, but I misrepresented some stuff that I sold you yesterday. And he said, I can't leave this like this. And he said, I have to talk to you. And he said, I don't really think you want or need. He said, but I misunderstood some things. He said, so I said the wrong things. And he said, I've got to straighten this out. Well, I appreciated that. But then there are people who want the money more than they care about what happens with you. I was told that little very short stint that I did some insurance selling. Oh, let your hair grow white, let your hair grow white, because at that point in time I was putting a little color on it. You know? Okay, I was putting a lot of color on it. And it was, they were saying, because you look more trustworthy. Where you, yeah, but the important thing is whether or not I am trustworthy. Well, in the marketplace, I thought of something so shallow compared to what y'all brought up. I just thought about how aggravating it is and how many times I'd like to have a confrontation with the person who parks their buggy over here in the aisle of the grocery store, and then they shop over here and you can't get by. They made a wide aisle out of it, but that person has figured out a way to take up the whole thing. Am I talking to anybody? And so, but I have also made it a rule to be quiet about it, because there are a lot of people who are aware of the fact every once in a while that they have made you wait or kind of cut you off or whatever. And I've just made up a little deal when they say, oh, I'm sorry, I just tell them, look, everybody has to be someplace, you know, and just go on. And they usually are thankful that I didn't say, oh, I didn't think you were ever going to make it, or something like that, which is easy to say when you're aggravated at somebody. But you don't have to be confrontational. So here we go. I think it's gracious to say, you know, well, everybody's got to be someplace. I remember a joke like that, and I don't think it's a terrible joke, but I wouldn't tell it in this class, but anyway. Well, okay, he said, what are some of the little things that you tell at home? Some of the common falsehoods spoken in the home. Because that's what this, if you
You're
had.
looking at that dish, I can just hear somebody saying, oh, it's okay, it doesn't taste burnt, it just looks bad. Or, you know, it's okay, it's not that bad.
Well, now, whoever prepared that is kind of on my team, because I like it when it's nice and crispy, you know, I like the okra burned.
Is it okra? I can't
No,
know what it
it's-
I thought it
is.
was Brussels sprouts.
Oh,
That's
you
what
got
I
it,
thought.
you got it, it's Brussels sprouts. And, well, I'm kind of like this. I don't like to tell Beth, that was terrible.
Yeah, man, you bring your job, so.
If she prepares Brussels sprouts, I'll say, well, you know, that was a good dish. And I think we ought to have it at least once or twice a year. She gets the point. She knows what I'm saying, that, And a lot of times I get tickled. She'll try something and she knows that, she wasn't crazy about it either. And she'll say, well, what did you think of that? I said, well, in about 6 months, we probably ought to have that again. And she knows that that really means, or maybe never. And she was already having the same thought. And I try not to ever do that in a way that hurts her feelings because she put effort into it, whether it was all that good or not. But Brussels sprouts has been on my list of things to do for forever. And I actually ran into some here a while back that I could eat, but that was very unusual. But what about in the church? That can be a confrontational thing, or can we disagree, or can we disagree and
Or can you just say hello and walk on? And avoid confrontation.
personally, I think that's wise. Yeah, if we're on a salvation issue, maybe not, but most of what happens is not a salvation issue. And the reason actually that I'm taking some of this the way I am is because I'm not going to probably get to the end of this lesson. And I need to tell you about some stuff at the end of this lesson. I may skip a little stuff here because he says skiers know that if they want to drive from Denver to Vail, Colorado, they have to go through the Eisenhower Tunnel. And it doesn't matter, he says, how much they dislike tunnels. If they want to make it to Vail, they have to go through that tunnel. Likewise, no matter how unpleasant the tunnel of chaos is, there's no other route to authentic relationships. Robbie and I have never been through a tunnel of chaos. So our relationship is not authentic. I mean, that's what I get from that. That's why I keep arguing with this guy. I'm not saying he doesn't have some points, but I think he's way overstated his point. Because you have to go through that tunnel to have an authentic relationship.
Don't you think he's saying a relationship based on lies is no relationship?
Sure he is. Sure he is. But I don't know why it has to go through a tunnel of chaos.
Lies create chaos.
That's true. But he's talking about telling the truth and it creating chaos. He says in the tunnel of chaos, hurts are unburied. Well, I don't have any hurts, Robin. And hostilities are revealed. Well, I don't have any of those either. Tough questions are asked. And what happens next? Sometimes the counterfeit peace shatters in an explosion of hostility that feels terrible. I can imagine that. But when we get through this time of turmoil, we find ourselves beyond pseudo community, entering into real community with the people in our lives. Now, I'm sorry, but I had to say, or maybe not. I realize that there are times when we have to make some sort of confrontation. And I remember a fellow that was so lovable in a town where we lived when I was growing up. And he got to where he wouldn't speak to my dad and mom and all this kind of stuff. And it was just silly. And so my dad didn't let it go on for very long until he went up and he said, John, we can't stay on like this. He said, what's wrong? Well, but this time he had had time to think about what he was upset about. And rather than bring up what he was upset about, which we think we know what it was, but it doesn't matter. He just looked at my dad and said, I'll tell you exactly what's wrong. I'm just a little bit too peevish about some things. And that was the end of it. It all blew over right there. And there didn't have to be a terrible confrontation, smooth things out.
Do you think he might be saying that truth would reveal the nature of somebody that they might get hostile about? You know, if you start having a conversation with somebody and they already don't like themselves for whatever reason and you approach them, maybe it reveals a nature that causes chaos.
Well, of course.
I don't know.
Well, the people easily become defensive. And being defensive doesn't always mean you're in the wrong. It's kind of taken that way sometimes, but it doesn't really necessarily mean that. I got to thinking about this, and I got to trying to think about real life and things that I have seen. I've been around a while. And I remember there was a lady in a certain town that's not all that far from here, very strong and absolutely lovely lady, member of the church. But, and I'm not going to say what, because I don't think it helps the story any to say what she did, but she did something kind of on a continuing basis that was hurtful to several of the other ladies in the congregation. And we were talking about a bunch of mature ladies who, any of whom can teach a good Bible class, Christian ladies. And they decided that because of this maturity and so forth, that they really ought to go to this lady who continued to be hurtful and tell her the fault between them and her, and to try to maybe clear the air and help the situation and help the lady. There was no intent to beat her down or do we'll get her told. There wasn't any of that spirit. I'll tell you what, folks, that blew up just about as high as anything can blow. It didn't go anywhere that anybody wanted it to. I don't do that. I have never behaved that way. I don't know why or how you could ever say anything like that about me. Yeah. It just, and the longer it went, and trying to give an illustration just made it worse. Now then, those ladies got back together and they said, we've been overlooking this for 20 or 25 years. We're just going to keep overlooking it. That's the only choice that we have. And we wish we just continued to do that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is there are good people, but none of us is perfect, and I don't think you can fix everything. And I think he kind of has the idea that maybe you can. I've decided to keep working on me because I need to. I hope you're still working on you. I'll backtrack here a little bit. He wants to know if you've ever risked a relationship by telling the truth or saying what was on your mind, maybe. That just comes to mind. If nothing comes to mind, that's okay. Because, you know, people like me, I've got another 2 or 3 stories to tell.
Well, sometimes you can't mince words. You tell them straight out, this is the way it is, this is what we do. If we don't do it this way, it's off the table.
Sometimes that is the case. You're right. I think that something that got missed in talking about this, that there is a such thing as timing. There's the right time and there's the wrong time. I remember my dad had a whole bunch in Tipton, Oklahoma. He had all kinds of Bible classes during the week. They were in people's homes. And he encouraged me when I was home from school, college, to go with him and to speak up and, you know, and be a part of the class and so forth. And I can remember at least 2 different times when I decided I'd speak up. Oh my goodness, he can kick you real hard under the table. And I knew what it meant. It meant shut your mouth. And so I would. I mean, I didn't want to hurt the situation or whatever, because he's doing his best, and I want to help bring somebody to Christ and have someone baptized for the remission of their sins so that they can go home rejoicing and all that. And then, you know, later, Dad and I talked. He said, Gary, here's the thing. There wasn't anything really wrong with what you were saying. But he said, you hadn't been with these people and heard all the things. You hadn't heard the backstory. You know all this stuff back here. And what you were saying is going to have to come. But he said, they're not ready for that yet. Timing. He just said, you got the timing wrong. And you didn't have the opportunity to know what I know. And that's why I kicked you on the table, is so that you could, we could cooperate in timing this in such a way that when we have another lesson or so, they will then be ready for what you were saying. They will be ready for what you were talking about. But I don't think they might have accepted it very well tonight if you had continued.
Jumping the gun.
Yeah. And that's easy to do. It's easy to do in you know, in physical games that we play and things like that. Swung the bat too soon. All kinds of ways that, and it's true in the mental, spiritual area too. God in His own time. So many times the book says, tries to get us to understand that, you know, we're in a hurry for things to happen. And God knows when it needs to happen. And He takes care of it on His time schedule. And and He just lets me sit there and fidget. Because sometimes that's what I do. So I think we need to look at these relationships and how we ought to handle them. I know what I'm looking for now. I just can't find it. I didn't put these on the slides because I didn't have time to put these on the slides. In Romans 14, verse 19, and if you can keep up with me, great. But it says, so let us do all we can to live in peace. Now, I don't think the Bible ever taught peace at any price. So this doesn't mean, well, some people might try to make it mean, but it says, let's do all we can to live in peace, and let us work hard to build up one another. And then James 3, 17 and 18. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is pure, That's the most important thing about it. And that's not all. It also loves peace. It thinks about others. It obeys. It is full of mercy and good fruit. It is fair. It doesn't pretend to be what it is not. Those who make peace plant it like a seed. They will harvest a crop of right or righteous living. And so there's another one about making peace. Mark 9:50. Salt is good, but suppose it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with one another. Psalm 34:14. Turn away from evil and do good. Look for peace and go after it. Hebrews 12:14. Try your best to live in peace with everyone. Try hard to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Romans 12:18. If possible, live in peace with everyone. Do that as much as you can. Ephesians 4:3. The Holy Spirit makes you one in every way. So try your best to remain as one. Let peace keep you together. Colossians 3:13. Put up with one another. I love that. Or sometimes I don't. Because I remember a time or two I was tired of putting up with the brother, but he says, put up with one another. Forgive one another if you are holding something against someone. Forgive just as the Lord forgave you. Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Holy Spirit produce what? But the fruit the Holy Spirit produces is love, joy, and peace. It is being patient, kind, and good. It is being faithful. The peace was in there. Proverbs 12:20. There are lies in the hearts of those who plan evil, but there is joy for those who work to bring peace. So that maybe is just the other side of the coin. You know, there's two sides to a lot of things. And I'm not saying everything the guy said is wrong. I just think he overstated his premise pretty much. And that we certainly need to be honest with one another, and we need to sometimes be confrontational. Sometimes it's needful.